This is the philosophical angle, defining concepts in current media. And I'm your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Nature of Aesthetics. These books are available free for viewing online at www.philosophypublishing.com. Along with me is my panelist, Rick Samuelson. Rick graduated from Yale, has an MBA from Wharton, an MA from Tufts, and he is retired from the investment banking industry. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
The purpose of the philosophical angle is to examine the nature of concepts and topics in current media and offer an explication of its essence. This week, the subject matter is going to be the convention speeches, particularly the speeches by President Obama and the Republican nominee Mitt Romney. So let's get to it. Let's start with, let's start with Romney first. Okay. The speech by Mitt Romney, he opened with the present problems of the economy. I think we all know those. They're certainly rampant in the media, but I suppose we can go over a couple here. Unemployment remains higher than when the president became in office. And that's probably the number one statistic that everybody knows. But there are others. Then he went into the promises of President Obama, such as regarding employment. That when he signed the stimulus bill, he said that unemployment will go down. Employment will go up, unemployment down. But it didn't happen. So Romney went over this promise and others. But then he went and talked about what individuals do when they are presented with problems, such as losing a job. Talked about how an individual will work 2 jobs at half the wage, that they strive to overcome their problems. He went into church, religion, family values, and he introduced his family. And then he started talking about Obama again, President Obama. And he said the best feeling for him was the day you voted for him. And got a big round of applause and a little bit of laughter. He said that President Obama is not going in the right direction. And that jobs for President Obama are through the government. He seemed to indicate that President Obama places a high reliance on the government to stimulate jobs. Then he went to talk about his time at Bain Capital and how he started Bain Capital, and that it was a tough time. It started with 10 people, and from there it grew. And from there he created Staples, or enhanced Staples, and Sports Authority, and Steel Dynamics, all successes, and there were many successes, and the successes were tremendous. And he joked about how some people have done very well in their investment in Bain Capital. But he said also that not all of his successes were successful, because businessmen encounter risk, and eventually there's going to be a time when things don't work out. And so there was a nice contrast between the president saying is not going in the right direction, that the president relies on government to produce jobs. And then after he follows it with the example of Bain Capital, a private institution producing tremendous wealth and tremendous opportunity for people for employment. A huge amount of people are employed at these companies now. Romney then concluded, President Obama attacks success, but that he celebrates success. Again, a contrast. Anti-success for success. And then he made a statement. It is the genius of American enterprise system that is great. What he's really saying here is that, going back and looking back at the rest of the speech, he's indicating individuals all throughout the speech, that individuals strive and produce success and do well, and as individuals are a component of society, and if we add up all the individuals, then you do have society, all of them producing, striving, becoming successful, you become a successful society. I read that as how he has structured his speech. His thoughts. We hark back to Obama constantly telling us that we are in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. But to counter that, individuals need to take risk, add their creativity, and it is not through redistribution that success is created. Be focused on the individual. Individuals strive, take risks, apply creativity. That will produce success, and from success you have goodness. Who can't deny that? The reason why when we become successful, we believe it to be good, because we can take our success and buy the things that we want to make our lives better, bring ourselves up away from misery. So the individual ultimately is producing the goodness of society. Individuals, in conclusion, are good. And trust in the individual enterprise system of America. And he emphasized that. I think that's a fair summation of his speech. Focusing on the individual, striving, giving creativity, adding in the mix of creativity, producing success, getting to where you want to go, getting to your goals, which will be good for you as an individual and society as a whole. Nice message. And let's go now to the Democratic National Convention and President Obama's acceptance speech. He started by saying there's a clear choice. The Democrats they value hard work, sharing, fairness, striving in their hard work, and striving for peace. Certainly no one can deny these things are great values. But then he said, the Republican solutions are no good. The U.S. has many problems. And challenges. And that the U.S. needs to advance its manufacturing. And as a good example for what he did, he said he saved GM. and sign trade agreements, and I agree with that. I believe he did sign a trade agreement, and that's definitely a positive. And and in conclusion to that those opening statements, he stated that his accomplishments involve creating 2.5 million jobs. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll discuss that with Rick a little bit later. I don't know how he came to that, but and his actions reward companies that will stay here in America. For the future, he wants to double exports, build wind turbines, become less dependent on energy, and gas in particular. And therefore, that's why he raised gas standards and is emphasizing biofuels and natural gas and helping these priorities through government standards and regulations. And then he said something very interesting, and he emphasized it, and so therefore I put it in red. He concluded that this cannot be done. We are not going to let that happen through the energy companies that are involved in the economy of producing energy. We will not let them create the government standards or any standards. It is the government that will create the standards by which we will produce our energy for the future. Education. This was, I put this in, highlighted again this because it seemed to be a particularly high priority. Education, he said that education is the gateway to success. I think we can all agree with that. That's certainly a very, very important item for the agenda of the United States, is to produce, obviously, well-educated people. And then he said, therefore, he took over lending in education. Therefore, everybody will have the money for education. So, the government took over lending to allow everybody the opportunity to get advanced education in the United States because it is so important. Education certainly is important. Then he went on to enumerate his platform in particular. He was going to raise taxes on the wealthy. And if you're making over $250,000 a year, he is advocating an increase of your taxation rate. And then he said, this is part of becoming a citizen, and a citizen of the United States, and being of having citizenship in the United States. It involves fairness and sharing, and we must accept the obligations in our citizenship. Individualism needs government. Two statements that I thought produced an insight into how he's thinking. That government is an integral part of everybody's lives. It seems that the companies are evil. We particularly mentioned Wall Street, insurance, energy companies, the wealthy, all mentioned. Government is good. These large companies or institutions or group of individuals, not so good. It seems, by diagramming his speech, that the wealthy and the large and the well-to-do and large companies create victims. They exploit people. This is kind of reminiscent of Marxism, especially the word exploitation. But he of course, did not use that. And that government is needed to referee this, to interject fairness and sharing, and from this will come prosperity. Let's just contrast that with, again, in total, with Romney. Here, it's individuals that produce success, that produce goodness. Here it's a combination of government working with companies to eliminate victims, to produce the prosperity. It also seems a further conclusion that the Democrat, or I might even substitute the word liberal, believes that the other person is suspect right from the start. That those who work, produce, and make a profit are inherently not good, and they have to be watched. Here, on the conservative or Republican side, it seems that the individual is inherently good. It is assumed that he is inherently good, and thus he can produce a profit, become successful, and produce goodness for society. Let's go to Rick and ask him what his thoughts are about these two speeches.
Well, first of all, neither candidate talked about the most important issues in any detail that lie before us over the next few years, and those, of course, around government spending or overspending, how those deficits can be brought down, and ultimately our outstanding national debt brought under control, and the policies of the Fed, which, to my mind, are paving the way toward extremely high rates of inflation at some later date. And while as a stock market investor I may be happy with how the stock market is temporarily performing on the back of that, for the sake of the country, those policies need to be changed pretty soon, and the management of the Fed replaced at a minimum. Having said that, my favorite part of Romney's speech was his discussion of his experience at Bain Capital. Relates precisely to my own experience in building businesses. It's hard, you don't always succeed, but it's the root of all prosperity. And government has pretty much very, very little to do with that. The best it can do is really kind of get out of the way, enforce the laws, and regulate where appropriate. I was struck by several contentions on the part of Obama, namely that regulations should not be rolled back, taxes should not be lowered, as if any scope for compromise on those issues is completely off the table. So what I see in his speech is absolute confidence that the policies of the last 4 years have to be upheld to the letter going forward in the next administration. It's very much a quantity approach to government spending. Hire 100,000 math teachers, retrain 200 million workers at community colleges, and whatever spending is required to achieve those types of goals certainly must be front and center.
Okay, you said something that was an interesting statement. You said where appropriate. In other words, regulations where appropriate. How do we determine that statement? How do we interpret that statement where appropriate? I mean, it intimates that government has a purpose in making regulations and making laws and regulations that come from the laws, and that sometimes they're appropriate. How do we adjudge that?
Yeah, I can only go back to my own experience, which indicates over many years being in Wall Street and in business that individuals do commit crimes and they need to go to jail. Okay, and we have laws and courts that are meant to take care of that, and to some degree, regulatory-based entities like the SEC and the FDIC are in a position to audit organizations to find evidence of this sort of activity. Companies are by and large not criminal. There may be one or two exceptions, but companies do not exist by and large to exploit their clients. In fact, they're there by and large to serve their clients. So the notion that banks were routinely or systematically exploiting borrowers in order to put them in the poorhouse, this has no relationship to anything I ever experienced on Wall Street. If anything, the banks were incompetent. They did not know how to manage risk. They were undercapitalized, but these are not criminal offenses. So these organizations are not inherently criminal. And that's where I think Obama and a lot of liberals and Democrats who lack direct experience in business are completely in another universe as far as how it really works.
Well, this is a really interesting subject, and to go back here to our little chart, he specifically mentioned insurance as being rather unethical. I've heard him constantly say that insurance companies and their health policies will not allow, will cut coverage and throw people out of their contract, of their insurance contracts. I have never seen such a thing, and I'm surprised that no one in the media came out and to tell us that insurance companies can't do that. If they do it, you take them to the court and you sue them because it's a contract between policyholder and insurance company. So this philosophy of the victim of companies seems to me far-fetched. What do you think, Rick?
Well, absolutely. Companies compete ferociously against each other to serve their clients. They want more market share. They want more revenues. They want more client fidelity. They want their clients to be happier so they don't go somewhere else. Well, what do you need to do to achieve that? Well, you don't do it by shafting your clients left and right. I mean, that's just not reality.
Okay, so competition is a basic mechanism by which companies behave ethically. Is that a reasonable statement here?
Well, if they're going to serve their clients properly, then the market mechanism will, over time, drive them toward delivering superior service.
And therefore success?
Yes.
So really here, the key to success for a company, I guess, is, as you say, serve the client. And what keeps them in check is competition. Is that a reasonable summation of the conversation here?
That is what I experienced.
Okay. Now, you did mention by and large to serve. Why the qualification by and large?
Well, I mean, there have been instances in the past when companies have colluded to fix pricing, and that's a matter of history, and there are laws that apply to those specific instances, but it is rare. The fact that you can only point to a relatively limited number of historical instances of that, despite the fact that there's trillions of dollars of business being done all the time in all manner of sectors and industries and so forth, I think underscores the point.
Okay. Now, in general, taking a look at the two speeches side by side, what is your impression of both, and how do they compare to each other? Give me your summation.
Well, I was, in terms of color and in terms of worldview, much more attracted to the Romney vision centered on freedom and starting with family, all right, as distinguished from the Obama vision, which views the country as a community guided by the government, and which will only act with the help of government types of incentives, whether it's hiring more teachers or providing more training. To me, you learn your ethics first and foremost through your family. That's where it starts. And therefore, supporting families and making sure that families are as protected as possible and cherished is the place to start for building a strong country. And freedom of choice is by extension where an individual can take the opportunity to fulfill his striving by choosing the field, the expertise, the job, whatever you call it, the calling in life that will inspire him to do his best.
Okay. I'd like to thank my guest and panelist, Rick Samuelson, for joining us today and his remarks. And that's about all we have time for this week's The Philosophical Angle. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.